Actually, normally I don't bother with mics because I used to bellow at people when I was a trainer. But I like to persuade other people to use them, so I should behave, shouldn't I? Really? Anyway, welcome to the second meeting of 2023, second indoor meeting. I'd just like to start by saying a few words, particularly to the people on Zoom. Welcome to the meeting. Very glad that you could join us. Elaine is hosting tonight, so if anybody's looking for the name of the host in the list of participants, Elaine will be at the top. But if you have any problems, please do just type that into the chat. It doesn't need to just go to Elaine. If you've got problems with sound or anything, then please you can always put it to everyone if you can't find the host. I gather we had a few problems with sound last time, so please do let us know. Elaine is trying to monitor it with headphones this time, but it's a bit of an experiment, so bear with us if we don't pick up that there's any problems. We have, I believe, one new member recently, Brian Hudgins from Datchet. I don't know if he's here or on Zoom, but I hope he has a long and fruitful association with the club. I'm delighted to say that we have now published the 2018 report, Birds of Berkshire, which will be distributed to all BOC members. So those of you who are here in person tonight should have already been given a copy. And Jane who's waving at us from the far back of the room, has the thankless task of delivering them to everybody else getting them delivered to everybody else in the club. Like I say, I sympathise, as it used to be part of my role. A few other announcements to make. Those of you who've been watching the slides will know that our next indoor meeting in 2 weeks' time is Monitoring Rare Breeding Birds by Dr. Mark Eaton. And our next field trip is next Tuesday on the 24th of January, which is Moorgreen Lakes, which Bob is leading. If you're interested in going on that one, please do get in advance. We're also going to start doing something that we used to do in the past, which is announcing other groups' meetings as a way of trying to publicise not only our own meetings through them, but also through them to us. As you know, we welcome everybody, members and non-members, to our meetings, and the two local RSPB groups are the same. The Woking and Bracknell's next indoor meeting is on Thursday, the 9th of February, at 8 o'clock. For those of you who came to one of our talks last year, might remember that Andy Sands is talking about the birds of Upper Teesdale, and that's at the Village Memorial Hall at Fitch Hampstead. And that's available for non-members, can go at a fee of £4. And their next field trip is on Wednesday, the 25th of January, and they're going to the London Wetlands Centre in Barnes. If you're interested in that, you'd need to contact Alan Moore, their contact. If anybody, by the way, wants any of the contact information about this, I've got it with me. I'm not expecting you to remember all this. Feel free to come and have a chat in the break or afterwards. The other local RSPB group, of course, is Reading, and their next indoor meeting is on Tuesday the 14th at 8 o'clock, 14th of Feb, I should say. UK Islands, Wildlife and Volunteering by Pauline and Colin Butler, and they charge £5 visitors, and that's at Pangbourne Village Hall. And their next field trip is on Sunday the 19th of February, when they're going to Rymead's RSPB Reserve in Hertfordshire. That's all the meetings I was mentioning. Does anybody else actually want to announce any other meetings at the local groups at all? Anybody? Okay. One other announcement I've got is that the BTO is doing their third national woodcock survey. They had surveys in 2003 and 2013, I think. And sadly, the indications since that last annual monitoring, since 2013, suggest that the population may have decreased even more. So they're repeating the survey this year. And they are looking, obviously, for surveyors. So if you're interested, the BOT website, or again, I've got contact here. It's been run by David York of the BTO, or you can contact Phil Murphy, our local BTO rep. Right, that's all my announcements. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to say in the office's announcements? Oh, yeah, James putting a hand up. Oh, I forgot to mention the photographic competition. Do you want to come down and say a word? Sorry, James, my fault for forgetting that.
I got to come down.
I can bring you the mic, but you definitely need to be on the mic so that people at home can hear you. Sorry. I'm being mean now. I'm making her walk down rather than me take the mic up.
Right. How do I use this?
It's on, yeah.
The photographic competition is on Wednesday, March the 15th. All members can enter. It will be here and on Zoom. And the closing date for entries is Friday, March the 3rd. And you can enter 5 photographs in each of 3 groups: portrait, flight of action, and birds in Berkshire. And all of the information is on the website. So please do look at the rules and send me some photographs as soon as you can. I will try to acknowledge all of the photographs I get. I'm really sorry. I missed somebody's photographs last year and I still feel really guilty about that. So if you don't get an acknowledgement from me within a week of sending me photos, please chase me. They get lost in my hundreds of emails. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you. Right, I've only got one other thing before we get on to the speaker tonight. Recent bird sightings. Having a quick look at Berk's birds before I came out, I can see there was a ringneck duck on 15th at Moor Green Lakes, and some lucky persons saw a merlin on the 16th at Shaw Hampstead. There's also, however, been a lot of blackcaps around in gardens. I'm glad to say I saw 2 today in my garden. Oh, there's loads of people in the room nodding as we on Zoom. What have other people been seeing? What other recent sightings have we got? Anybody in the room or on Zoom? I'd say so. Elaine was lucky enough to have a sparrow walk in her garden yesterday. Whereabouts you? Sitting on the top of the bird thing. No, I meant whereabouts in the garden. The bird was sitting on the top of the bird thing. Early. I should know that. Any other recent sightings?
There've been up to 3 pintail at Moor Green Lakes.
Did everybody hear that? No. Everybody hear that? Yeah. Up to 3 pintail. Thank you all. Anything else? Oh, yeah. Ted was putting his hand on.
That we ramblings.
Oh.
We're lucky. Yeah.
Ted's been,
they turn up more or less.
excellent. Ted's been getting ramblings as in his garden in Ascot, as he does every year, the lucky man.
So.
He's apologetic then, all right. Any other recent sightings? Okay, let's get on then with the main aim of the evening. Before I introduce our speaker, I'm just going to set up his slideshow. We tend to do it the other way around, which I think is a bad habit. So I'm actually going to get the slides working first, rather than making wait while I stand here while I'm trying to do that. Bear with us a second. That look all right, Elaine? Yeah. Okay, you should all be able to, I hope, at home and in the room see his first slide. Right, so our speaker tonight, I'm delighted to say, is Rob Robinson from the BTO, who's a senior scientist and has been with them for over 20 years. And you can tell that from a very impressive list of publications on their website, covering a wide range of topics that they've been involved with. However, tonight he's focusing on bird ringing and why it is vital to understanding why and how bird populations change and how it helps formulate effective conservation actions.
Right. Welcome everybody. Thank you for having me. It's a delight to be back and seeing people in a proper room, actually seeing faces rather than staring at my Zoom screen. But welcome also to those of you who are joining on Zoom. I hope the technology works. So the question, when I tell people that I'm associated with ringing, so I guess my main role of the BTO over the years has very much interacted with the ringing scheme. I am usually asked questions. First of which is, oh, you've been ringing for 100 years, don't you know everything? And the second one of which is, oh, isn't ringing a bit last year? It's all about tags and technology. So what I hope to do today is to answer not only the questions there on the screen, how ringing can help conservation, and talk a bit around how ringing fits into the wider monitoring, wider monitoring landscape. I will try and answer those two questions well. But before talking about today's about what we're doing today, I'm going to go back a little bit in history. Before I do that, I am going to say I'm one of these people who wanders around a little bit. So for the people on the camera, I'm hoping that somebody will wave if I'm a bit too far away. If I do disappear, do shout in the chat that they can try and bring me back. The people in the room hopefully will still be able to see. Ah, hello. Oh, possibly.
It's a good question, and I'm not sure of the answer. Oh, he's taller than me, isn't he?
I could crouch.
Not sure if I can. Ah. Well, you live and learn, don't you?
Right, and how's the camera angle looking?
Oh, yeah, so do you want to, shall I play and you...
Yes, so the view of my belly is probably not quite good. Is that?
Sorry, but
I do have a mic, so...
I'll see what we're talking about. Is that better for the camera, then? Yes.
Shall I just go on, or do we want to wait to sort this out? I'll go on. Right, okay. So, although ringing these days is very important for conservation, obviously excuse me. There we go. Obviously, one of the first uses of ringing is to understand migration. Migration is, of course, an endlessly fascinating topic. So you can be forgiven for not knowing that these are sandhill cranes. There's about 350 cranes in this picture, and there are migratory species in North America, and flocks of literally tens of thousands, so that's 350, with the sums, migrate down through parts of North America. Of course, when they arrive in the autumn and in the spring, they're very noisy. If anybody's seen cranes here in Europe, they do the same sort of thing. And people actually hold festivals to celebrate the arrival of the cranes. And similarly, migration can produce some spectacular sights. So this is the Chevron Petronas oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico. And this was on a sort of a wet, foggy, I don't want to say a Scottish, it's a wet, foggy day. And these birds, most of which I think are yellow warblers, American red stars, sort of literally fell out of the sky and took shelter in this platform. So you can see that migration is a very visible thing. People have probably ever since people started recording things, have tried to understand what's going on. Of course, in the early days, they didn't have quite the understanding that we do now. So Aristotle, back in ancient Greece, knew that red stars were present there in summer, and that they disappeared in winter. And in winter, robins came along. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about this one. There you go. Modern technology. Actually, this is old.
Organisation the best. Oh, that should be muted.
I think you need to be fairly close.
Probably. Okay, this, hopefully that'll be better on the Zoom people. Are they smiling? We getting lots of smiling emojis coming up? Or just one? Just one. Just carry on. Okay. So yeah, so red start disappear for winter. But Greece robins arrived for winter. So of course, Aristotle saw the two were not entirely dissimilar and assumed that one competed into the other. And similarly, skipping forward a few hundred years, it is an illustration from a book by Olaus Magnus, who was the architect of Uppsala, I think. And he wrote a book called The History of the Northern Tribes. And this was a woodcut of a purported real sighting of fishermen bringing up in the nets. Don't know if you can see fish. I'll leave it in here. Fish, but also swallows, birds, or swallows. And that sounds a bit, I mean, it's easy to laugh at that these days, but if you cast yourself back to the sort of the mid-16th century and think about what they knew then, and think about the fact that in every autumn you see swallows swirling around reed beds looking for food, and then going down into the reed beds to roost at night. And then swallows disappear. And then in the spring, you see them, and often where you first see swallows is at wetland sites, reed beds, where insect life is often richer. So actually, to assume that birds were hibernating wasn't such a strange thing. Of course, so people knew that migration was a thing. They needed a way to study it, and marking birds was marking individual birds probably the best way to do that. And the person who is credited as the father of bird ringing was a Danish chap called Hans Cleave Mortensen. In there, very fabulous moustache. And the innovation that he made was to have both a number on the ring, so that you could identify the individual bird, but also an address, so that people who found it, wherever they found it, knew where to send it. And his first experiments involved starlings. And I think it was quite close. Anyway, so that was in 1899. Britain caught on to the idea and said it was a really good idea. And two chaps in Britain started independently the ringing schemes that we have today. Harry Witherby was editor of Bird, and Arthur Lansdowne was professor in Aberdeen. So they started, both started national ringing schemes, or ringing inquiries, as they states. It was an inquiry. They started in 1909, and the Aberdeen scheme sort of fell a bit into in the First World War. The British Bird scheme carried on, but eventually they realised around the time that they found it in the and the first two recoveries of birds that were ringed are here. The third was a lapwing, a chick that was ringed and then caught a few yards from the place of marking. And then second one was one chick. And actually, in the early days, a lot of ringing was for birds and nets. It's not until the 1950s. Traps and horns birds. And of course, individual drones then had much more import these days because they were newer and rarer. So that was 100 years ago. Moving forward, we now know where swallows go. So our swallows migrate down through Europe, and most of them go to spend the winter in East Africa. And of course, Aristotle wasn't wrong in everything. He was quite wise. So, and over the course of what is it now, 110, 112 years, we've amassed a huge amount of information, which we try to put onto our website. And this is a lot of huge amount of information. Go to the website, look at the ringing scheme. You can find annual reports of the numbers of birds ringed, and you can find other information about multiple sequences. And ringing is particularly important in Britain because we are very much at a crossroads. So this map just shows the encounters of birds that have been encountered or marked birds that have been encountered in Britain at the other occasion. So either birds ringed in Britain, found abroad, or birds ringed abroad. And you can see literally almost every continent in the world. But we have terns that go to Australia, swallows to South Africa, a lot of birds do. We have shearwaters that go to the eastern coast of South America, and then we have the east of Greenland and some waders. First, I don't think it's recovery. I'm going to write breeding grounds. So, the different colours here represent different. So blue is winter, red is summer, green and orange are passage, I think green's spring in those. Anyway, so we have birds coming from all over the world, literally coming to Britain. So just looking at a couple of species. Does anybody recognise what this species might be? So regular interchange with Iceland and some of our birds being down to Spain. Any guesses? Anybody chatting particularly into that? So people can participate in this too? Well, wonder whether it's there or it should be that. Not sure much we can do. Okay, I guess best I can. So not a common bird here, although seen recently, like merlin. So a lot of Icelandic merlins come here for the winter. Our birds breed. You'll see many are ringed as chicks up in Scotland, and they move them down. So immediately you can start to see what different populations of birds do different things. Next species, slightly more familiar. Anybody? Any guesses? What sort of foods? And you'll pick yourself and you find out. So these are in fact robins ringed in Britain in the breeding season. So you see that most of our robins actually stay within Britain. A few are a bit more adventurous and move south. But if you look at robins that are ringed in winter in Britain, they come from a much wider range of so we have birds coming from and some of those. So again, sort of lots of things there. Okay, one or two more. This one's a fairly distinctive. If you focus this, birds moving to the Ronse, mostly in autumn. Excellent. Neil, full marks. Shelduck. So I think that most of our shelduck go to molt in the Wadensee. Ducks are, I was going to say stupid, but I should probably say unusual. In the multiple of their platforms. So they're quite vulnerable to predation. So they want to occur a large flock of individuals of with the Wadensee, which is a really interesting phenomenon. We have a PhD student, Green, who is doing to understand a lot of these lines are crossing exactly where there's a high density of informs. And then finally, this is a chart of the numbers of a particular ringed each year. Anybody like to hazard a guess? Quite an impressive rise. No. No, the whorefish numbers aren't going up, ringing numbers aren't going up as people are ringing. I think not quite as spectacular as this. Be out of your misery. Yellow-browed warbler. So again, I sort of put this up to show, to suggest that ringing can also be a bit more later on. There's certainly numbers of yellow-browed warblers are increasing. They don't seem to be starting to breed yet, but presumably it can only be a matter of time. And of course, this is all sort of fairly basic biology trying to understand when birds go. But that takes on new meaning, particularly now with avian fluke. And BT was spending quite a lot of time thinking about understanding this process, consequences of it, both in terms of the horrible bird outbreaks in wild birds that we've seen, but also working with European colleagues to understand migration to European scale and how that might interact with birds. Certainly in Britain, the industry is worth £3 billion a year. So anything that's impacting that, people suddenly perk up and get interested. And there's obviously something in that, we're trying to develop a tool whereby we can say if there's an outbreak of wild birds or in poultry in a particular area in Europe, what is the likelihood of birds migrating from that point to Britain or actually to any other point in Europe, and then saying that what does that mean of avian fluke through wild birds? Recognizing, of course, that not using the spread. So, still very relevant, still very current, and we have a lot of information, and much of that has been gathered together in books over the years, from the very first migration atlas back in Germany in 1931. This is just a selection over time, and I'd particularly like to point out the Serbian one at the end, which covered not only birds, but those of you who are fluent in Serbian, sorry, not me. It also covered bats, of course, bats. Particularly. So that's great. Books are fabulous. I love books, but there's only so much you can do with traditional printed format. All the information goes on the web. There we go. And this is so we've just completed BT just done for Euring, just done a European migration atlas. Now you can imagine if you're trying to cover the whole of migration patterns across Europe, how big that would be. All the series of books. So we put it on the website, migrationatlas.org. It's free for anybody to use. Information there goes. Go lose half a day looking at it. I'll just show you some example maps just to whet your appetite. So this is barn swallow. So you can see our birds in the blue line here migrating to Eastern Africa earlier, but also birds from Scandinavia, also migrating to Southern Africa. Interestingly, birds from Central Europe don't migrate as far, and that's actually a fairly common pattern of bird migration. It's called leapfrog migration. The birds the populations that are closer to the equator move over the distance, and birds that are at high latitude. That actually is environment, and probably also look at the populations on the non-breeding grounds. So, of course, not all of our migrants are summer migrants. We have winter migrants too. So you can see barnacle goose, and you can see that actually in Britain we do one from Greenland and one from Svalbard, and birds from northern Siberia are migrating mostly very between them. Another winter visitor, starling. Actually, our birds tend to be relatively as well, but we get a large of from Venice, Canada, Eastern Europe, as far as. And then just finally, many of you will be thinking about just now, blackcaps, where you've got really quite complicated patterns, movements, but also changes in patterns. So after 100 years of ringing, as the people who talk to me assume we know pretty much most to know about ringing. Well, spoiler alert, technology very much does have a place to tell us about migration, and basically it's upending to what's new. So I'm just going to give a few examples. And this line for birds is red-necked phalarope. Beautiful wee things. And there are a couple of people in the audience who won't be entirely surprised at this preponderance of wader examples as I go through. I realised when I put the slides together that actually quite a few of them waders. That's entirely coincidental, of course. But if you read Birds of the Western Palearctic, BWP, this is what it says about phalarope. When it was written in the late 70s, I think, with the wader one came out, we hadn't actually had any recoveries of Scottish birds. We didn't really know what it meant. We knew a lot of birds winter in the Arabian Sea, or human birds in the Arabian Sea, and we know that quite a lot of birds winter off America are often. So those are the sort of two most likely options. What some ringers did on Shetland was they put some geolocated tags on. Geolocators are really small. Phalaropes are really small birds we have in the hands. They're not much. I think the same ring size, probably about the same as the green. A bit bigger, but not thickness. So you need a really light tag. So geolocators are basically archival tags. They record the position of the time of daylight and nighttime, from which with a bit of clever math, you can work out roughly where they are. Not terribly precise information. The important thing is they don't require much battery. That's always the way to do it. Because they're archival tags, they don't need to set just it's like phalaropes. So anyway, some ringers up in Shetland put tags on, I think, 6 birds beginning of August on the breeding grounds, and waited eagerly the next year for the birds to come back. Tag and kept bird. So it's 4 occurrences. And when they started to look at the tags, they found quite interestingly, the birds did indeed migrate west the coast of America. And they did it quite quickly. And they thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. Because I think most people were expecting them to go the other way. Fair enough. But then they looked at the rest of the data. And in early September, birds started moving on. And actually what they did, they spent the winter off the coast of Ecuador, where there are huge flocks of Atlantic phalaropes, but everybody assumed those come from straight up North America. And then they were able to follow the migration back east. They staged again on the sort of the Eastern American seaboard, and they covered the battery ran out before but yes, that was one of the more unexpected results of tagging. But it does show the sorts of beats that birds, migration beats birds capable of. But if you think that's an impressive migration, as somebody once said, you ain't seen nothing yet. So this, some of you may have heard the story a few years on that. This is bar-tailed woodhead, so same species that occurs in Britain. On my local hatchery on the North Ward. So different species, species called parrots, and it breeds in Alaska over here. And it winters in Australia and New Zealand. And people have often wondered how it gets from one side. What route does it take? The logical thing, given the distance, that's nice one, would be for it to do this. Take a westerly route down through China, Japan, down through Indonesia, probably down to New Zealand. However, there have been relatively few sightings of birds in the ocean along that route. So people were kind of a bit confused. Then if you think places like that, maybe the people were missing the box. There were occasional records of birds in places like Hawaii and Micronesia. Occasional dropouts of birds. And it was kind of a truth that these were sort of birds that got lost and all the rest of it. They weren't sort of representative of the population. And then some scientists from USGS, which run the banding scheme in North America, stuck some satellite tags on birds. Now these are quite big birds. You could put a tag on them that has a battery that's big enough to beam up to the satellite, and you get much more precise follow actual migration. And this is what happened. The birds left Alaska on the 30th of August. They then flew non-stop for, what's that, 9 days, 12,000 kilometers near enough, to New Zealand. In fact, actually, this tagging program has continued, and recently there was a bird that made the same journey, and the birds are quite good at reading the weather, and they will fly around storms. If there's a big storm in the Pacific, they will take them out of the and that bird travelled, I think, 13,500 kilometers. And they do that, which is pretty damn impressive. And part of the reason that they can do it is it's obviously the bird's physiology is set up for doing that. I can talk about that later on. But also because the wind direction statements the ground speed is much higher, so you ride the winds. In the spring, the winds they'll be flying against the winds, so they have to take longer routes. So they fly only 10,000 kilometers to the Yellow Sea in China, where they stop up and journey back to everyday things. Pretty impressive stuff. So satellite tags are great for following these large-scale movements, but we can also look at movements in much finer scale. And this is just a sort of a teaser for what work that BTO has been doing at the minute, is using what we call GPS tags. So these are tags that talk to the mobile. So they don't have to beam all the way up to sort of satellite. So technology is improving all the time. Battery technology means tanks last for longer, and crucially, they are smaller. Anyway, so we've been doing a lot of work with bones, and the information that you can get from these tanks is truly impressive. So this is a map of more or less of our gull, I think, as it flew through the landscape. And you can see each of these little yellow dots is position, and the sort of the lollipops, like lines here, indicate the height of the bird. So not only are you getting quite fine scale ground location, you have to work out where in the air column the bird is. So you can here it sort of took off from its resting point here, flew upwards over that road, and then flew down and then started doing sort of parts of and you can see the sort of scale of fine scale information you can get. And that's really, not only is that sort of quite impressive, quite interesting, right, but actually when you start to look at 3D locations, you can start to ask, well, what is the probability of birds obstacles in their path? Like, for example, wind farms, right? And that's a big area of research for us at the minute. And this is of gull flights through a wind farm in the sea. And you can see that some birds are clearly active in avoiding turbines. And they can do that on bright, clear days, whether they can do that on misty, foggy days is perhaps another. So we're very much there trying to work out what the impact is. And actually, the work that we are doing with that already an impact not only on where wind turbines are placed, so we place in places where wind turbines are a bad idea, so we use for floating. Actually, also affecting design. So by changing the height of the rotor blades a small amount, actually you can avoid a lot of things. On board, which is a great outcome, and that was evident by this, like. And I'm sure you've all heard of the BTO cuckoos, been here for quite a few years now. So these again are satellite tags, so we get quite a bit of information from them. And this is where the 10 o'clock minutes, there's tags days ago. You can see that some of them here failed to make it, or they failed to make it. But most of our cuckoos are down here forest. And actually, they're starting to get restless. They're starting to move, and we would expect them to back north sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks. More, have a look at the cuckoo beard. And though it's not there really clear this year, you can see broadly, you can see this. There's 2 different routes to the cuckoo season. They can either migrate west, down through Spain, or they can migrate and take a more easterly route down through. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to minimize the sea crossing, flying across the sea is wrong. It's much easier if you fly across land. You can see that pattern much more clearly if you sort of combine a bunch of years. The first 4 years worth of data. And you can see the tracks in red of the birds taking more westerly route. And the nice thing about the Boogie project is we can tagging birds different parts of the country. And what this map shows, this is a map from the Atlas. So what this map shows is literally Atlas cables. The last Atlas the early 90s, 1992, and one which basically 2007. The red squares are where numbers of groups go up, and the blue squares are where numbers. Many of you will know that these days down here, we are then they were groups. And the little pie chart, you can see where we've marked. The little pie charts give the proportion of birds marked that flew in each direction. The yellow ones flew down through Spain, and the red ones flew down through. And you can see that none of the Scottish birds, sorry, I should go to the screen. Where are we? None of the birds from Scotland, Western, they all. Whereas the bird in the family flew from much more. And it seems that the mortality on that westerly route is much higher. Basically, birds, there's a whole bunch of issues in Spain, some of which are related to climate, some of which are related to humans, water habitats, loss. It means the birds are dying either in Spain or they don't have enough. They don't have enough fat. Or a lot of the birds. That's a major obstacle for them. So that's already starting to show how we can use ringing techniques. Remember that ringers are the people who have the experience on how ringing can sort of start observations are. I'm going to talk a bit more about that side of things after we start roughing. But these locational tags can obviously tell us a lot of really fascinating, really interesting stuff. But some things that they cannot tell. So they're very good at telling us where a bird has gone. We're tagging a bird from its. They cannot tell us where a bird has come from. And actually, sometimes that can be quite awesome. So I put a slide up here of guillemots on the water. So you think about oilstills. Fortunately, not very frequent these days. But if you have a bunch of birds washed up in an oil spill or dying in an oil spill, the chances of any of those birds having a tag are vanishing. Tag very many birds. These tags are fabulous, but they're also fabulously expensive. But partly also because of the ethical issues. Any tag can affect. And obviously what we try to do is try to minimize the effect. Just take it away. But still, you always want, I think, risk any chances of harm risk. Where in rings we know is largely a safe practice. Bring a lot of these first so that chances of and we know this because we've looked at birds have been recovered from hospitals. There are things that you work out which colonies are affected. And you might say that well actually all schools are in the past. They are. But think about this year, people finding birds which are dying from avian flu. So there are many reasons why birds might die, and ringing can tell us where those birds are. Individual population, that might be where the conservation priorities are, tags. And also, as I alluded to, you can ring safely, quickly, cheaply, large numbers, in most cases, large numbers of birds. And that becomes really important to understand what very good at telling us about individuals. And I hope that those find a population. Bringing people onto a large number of individuals get a better handle on what the representatives are of the population. So I'm going to leave it there for the minute. I gather that you let's see, please on an orderly queue and don't fight over who like these turnstones with.
I'll wish them this tea and biscuits on the front. Okay, welcome back, everybody, and I'll pass you over to. Well, before I pass over, I've just. It's quite clear there's been quite a lot of problems on Zoom with the sound, so apologies for that. There's a possibility that it's because we're using a different laptop with a different microphone than what we usually use. But I also have made a couple of changes to settings in the hope that may make a difference. But we'll see where we get on. Anyway, I'll pass you back to Bob for the second half.
Okay, thank you. I hope you're all fully refreshed and fortified for round 2. And I'm going to take a slightly different tack now and actually start to address sort of the question that I posed open this time. And again, sort of taking a step back a bit. Nice, right? One of the things that it's so obvious, it's a truism. I'm sure we're all noticing it and have noticed it over our lifespans, is the environment is continuing in a place that has as high a human population, many different Atlantic. So things like wet flood meadows are now increasingly rare. Lost a lot of these really interesting special habitats. But also we've seen changes in sort of wet countryside. And Britain, 70% of the land area of Britain is given over to farming, either arable or pastoral farming. And what we've seen over the last which drive step up farming, basically to provide us. Next time you're in the supermarket really cheap food, just stop and have a think about how they produce that price. And one of the ways they've been able to do this is farming is recognized, it's you get, but that has had huge consequences on wildlife, in part because Britain is a farming country. So, for instance, things like the great partridge, in my lifetime, not that old, which I like to say, have declined by over 90%. It's worth just stopping and thinking about that, and thinking about what would happen if the human population had been, what the reaction would be to that. Yeah, for great partridges, without really many people thinking. There has been a understand those declines using our data and understand how we can put them in environment space. And it's not just great partridge, it's species like once common around here, I imagine, but probably now quite scarce. Look for petalers. Tree sparrows, like sparrows are doing strong best. But also species like quail and redback shrike. And it's important to note that these species, most of their decline happened before large-scale monitoring started. So when we think back to what we might think about, we might think of loss for partridges, but actually, maybe the landscape should also have lots of quails and redback shrikes. They were once common over southern England. They bred in lots of different places. But now, of course, redback shrike is extinct, and quail is And it's worth just thinking about, I'm sure many of you have children, what your children or your grandchildren or your nephews are experiencing today. And that's the baseline by which they're going to judge the first process. And that's a really impoverished compared to what our grandparents there's an increasing sort of scientific interest in that people can only engage and conserve what they know, and previously less impetus to sort of recreate the world and move towards. That's all very doom-laden. Apologies about that. Not all habitat change is bad. Through the 60s and through the 50s and 60s, and even through to the 90s, lots of construction. People needed gravel, needed aggregates. They dug it out of the ground. Probably a bad thing. But the lakes that they created when they restorated habitats, and quite often they're used for recreation, but also called park, where I live. And actually, that's been really good for species. Things like the little ring blubber and grey-crested grebe were a really rare species. A little ring blubber, I think, before the 1940s didn't breed in Britain, and now it does. Okay, number of what it does. So not all too much is bad. But population farming continually changing. What is so along this axis here, each red bar going up, going down, and up from the line is a species. What a species are. And what it shows is the change in the number of aqua squares between the 2000 between the I need to get it right. The 1987, the 89-92 aqua, one before last, and the last one. How many squares, extra squares, we see. So some species were recorded in more squares. Some species were recorded in fewer. For instance, little egret, no surprise, showed the biggest increase in the number of squares recorded. It was pretty much a rare species in the 1892. It actually bred by that point. But right at the other end, there you go, you've got that track. Was recorded in some very interesting sources in the 87 Atlas, sorry, whichever it was, the 89 Atlas, squares. So what I want you to notice that between those two extremes, right, there's obviously a whole rank of other species. Or when you notice in that red circle, there are very few species that are still. Change is the usual pattern, either up or down. And that happens in space, so in terms of the first and squares, they're all behind. It also happens in time. So this is a chart showing the results of the heronry census, the longest running single species study in the world, started in 1940. Yeah. And what I hope you can see is this thin blue line here just plots the numbers each year. Okay? And the dotted lines indicate the uncertainty around that. So, you can see it's quite jagged. Numbers year on year are quite big. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, one of which is to do with winter weather and when herons find food. So here's 1996. And then there's a bunch of other cold winters. So year on year, the population differs, changes up or down. But that change also happens over the table and also the green line, line. Sort of smooths out those annual patterns. But you can see even over several decades, the population is changing up or down. And then even over the course of the whole survey, of the 100 years survey, there's actually been a net change. So it changes all the time in populations. And the trick is to understand a lot of what BT was about, and one of the key uses of breed. It's not just grey herons. So this rather complicated orange basis shows the 25-year population and from BBS for the 103 species that and you can see each line is a species. The leader here increasing, great spotted woodpecker increasing, now stable, curlew, I'll talk about curlew later, decreasing, buzzards going up, missile thrush going down, and you'll have some species, finch somewhere, left, yes, which is initially going up, but then going down. And I'm sure you've heard also BT research about probably going to go about the impact subsequent. But pretty much whatever pattern you want to find, you can find it. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why populations. This is just a graphic that's produced by BirdLife, and it relates globally threatened species. And the size of the adults give some impression of relative importance of threats. You can see here agriculture in red, one of the most important threats. So it's very elsewhere in the world. Climate, also an important driver, but a whole range of other drivers there as well. And one of the things that we want to do is to try and understand which kind of factors are important for each individual species. What's causing this panoply of what we're seeing? And overall, the pattern for bird species in Britain is just an aggregate of all the trends that we look at. So you can see the monitoring started in 1970. We know relatively little about population changes for most species prior to 1970. You can see sort of after the initial a general decline in abundance through the 80s and 90s. Overall, bird populations. Well, there are worrying signs of a decrease. So, we want to try and understand these things. We want to try and understand which drivers are involved. And at root, it's quite simple. Bird populations are a bit like bank accounts. Birds can enter the population or they can leave the population. It becomes an accounting exercise. What we need to understand how many birds are in the population, how many young birds are coming into the population, or possibly how many birds are coming into the population. We're very fortunate to some respect, unfortunately to others, that Britain's an island, and actually most of our breeding populations they will breed in the same area year after year. Obviously, some of it's great, and the population relatively separated from us in the continent. Unlike the same. You've got most materials that are So that makes our response a bit easier. In most cases, we tend not to. Birds can enter the population, birds can also leave the population by dying. A bit like that's true for people with information. And then also they can leave the population. So basically, to understand population change, in its simplest form, we just have to quantify each of the four categories, four quantities. It's a little bit more complicated than that, as I'll go. But I'll bring it back to essentially what we want to do. Now, if you've got a small island population, so this is Seyfield magpie robin on the left there, and a kagoo from New Caledonia on the right. Small island population, you can actually pretty much follow every individual. And you can see this colored. And you get a real good sense of what each. Takes a bit of effort, obviously, but it's relatively straightforward. Even in places like Britain, you can start to do things with individual populations. There are many of you who have heard about the Oxford woods in Oxfordshire, not very far from them. And they've got a relatively nice woods. Birds are breeding in their spot. It's really wonderful. And that's now been going on, I think, the birthday last year, so a really impressive effort. And even for range restricted species, so this formulating, once relatively common over much of top England, south and now restricted to Devon. Population got down to, I think, 118 pairs, but the RCB, just some targeted research work, they were able to use ringing and food. They were able to use that to encourage farmers to provide extra food. But it worked. Cervantes are relatively ranged. But what about the commoner species that we're interested in? We can't have professionals going out and doing field work, paid field work, and that's where the wonderful volunteers of people come in. And I ask, how many people here have done a survey of one sort or another for each? Some of you. Excellent. Well, all of you, thank you very much. Your result, your hard work will have contributed in some way to what I'm about to say. And this schematic is sort of what we've slide. Just sort of summarizes the different schemes that we run. So you see the bird survey here, wild bird survey or bird watch, various shooting schemes, and how each of those contributes to different demographic parameters. A little bit. What I really want you to know is this red column. So this is an estimate of ringers, nest recorders, breeding bird surveyors put in each year. And it's a phenomenal amount of effort. It's really, really impressive. And actually, these really. But without our volunteers, we couldn't do any of the work that we do, so we're hugely grateful. And certainly I am, because basically they collect the data and keep it. So to all of those of you, we should have done very much. But of course, volunteers are volunteers. You have to rely on people's goodwill. If you're doing things at large scales, you're doing things in different places. Quite a lot of things you need to do that. It's not a cost-free model. If you've got paid people, you can tell them exactly what to do, and you can crack the whip. We do try to do that with deers, but perhaps not quite to the extent. And I'm going to give you just a little taste of some of the things that we have to think about. And it's quite hard to do in a lecture at dark, in the middle of the night, the birds aren't very big birds around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a picture on the screen, and I'm going to ask you to count the number of chaffinches. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to do that. Probably that many, right? And then we'll see how people do. So 3, 2, 1. Right, how did you do? What I'm going to do, if you saw at least one chaffinch, put your hand up. Right, everybody pretty much saw one chaffinch. Give your hands up, keep your hands up. For at least 2 chaffinches, keep your hands up. If you didn't see 2 chaffinches, I guess some people only saw 1. If you saw at least 3 chaffinches, keep your hands up. 4, hands up. So somebody saw 4, 2 people saw 4. You saw at least 5 chaffinches. Excellent. Because there were only 4 chaffinches. So if you've seen 5, I'd be slightly worried about how much you'd have to drink. So hopefully all of you spotted the one on top there. And I'm guessing, or I'm hoping, most of you also saw the one on the bottom left. Maybe you didn't see the ones in the middle. And okay, this is sort of a little bit of an artificial exercise, but it's absolutely fabulous painting by highlights one of the things that one of the key things that we have to think about when we're looking at national populations is we cannot sample every individual, unlike the magpie robin we can do, or even white races. We have to make some assumptions about the birds that we do see, how they relate to the wider population. And that explains, and we spend quite a lot of time, well, certainly I do, and quite a few of my colleagues do spend a lot of time thinking about this. And that explains why when we give you survey forms, we ask you to do things in trying to reduce some of that variability in detection, trying to make things as sort of comparable as possible. Okay. Right, so back to where we are. We've got a population trend of blackbirds, and we want to understand what's causing that. And basically, what we need to know are 3 things. We need to know the numbers. So to understand how many individuals there are at a particular time for a particular year at sea, we need to understand how many young were produced in the previous year, T-1, how many of those young survived, but also how many of those adults survived. And now it's very fortunate to BTO, and BTO is actually unique in the world in that we have volunteer-based schemes that provide us with numbers for each of these 3 entities. And that's actually really unusual. So BBS data obviously give us the numbers of birds, give us the population size. Nest record data tell us something about productivity on the pair might raise. The ringing data obviously give us survival rates, and often the survival rates of juveniles, young birds, also adults. And when you so there's the ringing data and the record data also tell us something observed on the ground is that if you have a good survival rate, if you have lots of chicks being produced, then the population size is going up. And now you'll see I've highlighted in green the BBS data detectability. On a sort of 1 hour BBS transit visit, you're not going to see all of the birds that are present in your club. We all know that. You only ever see a sample. Similarly, for ringing data, you only ever catch a small sample of birds, and then you might recatch or re-encounter a subset of those birds. So those are all things that we have to build into our calculations. But if we do that, actually, increasingly, we can start to build in other data too. So particularly what we've done is use survey data to look at population change. But increasingly, for those of you who do bird tracks and submit complete lists, again, they're a representation of the numbers of birds that are there in the countryside. So they provide some information about population change. And if we can account for the different detectability, so with BBS, we have a set protocol, we know what proportion of birds you might see. With bird track, it's a bit more variable because people go out for 30 minutes, they go out for an hour, they go out for 2 hours, they might take a walk this way, they might take a walk that. If we can understand some of those differences, we can start, pull all of that together and get better information about how our populations change. And that's basically my day job. And now I know what you're all coming here for is a crash course in Bayesian statistic, but it's getting a bit late, so I think I'll skip over the next few slides and get straight to the pretty pictures of the birds. So I'm just going to give you an example for lapwing about how all that gets put together. And this is the population trend for lapwing. It's quite similar to lots of other farm bird trends. Through the 70s and 80s, the population was relatively stable. There was a big decline through the late 80s and the 90s, and then the population has been relatively stable since. Now, the question is, what causes that big decline? Well, from ringing data, we know that coincided with the period of low survival. So this is slightly complicated chart. I thought there's adult survival. But normally, adult survival here is about 85%. That means an adult lapwing can expect to live about 10 years. However, in the 80s, that dropped to about 75%, which means an individual lapwing only living maybe 5 or 6 years. That's a huge change in its life. See why it might cause a population to drop, might cause a population numbers. But then, since then, the survival rate has recovered until it's back to pretty much exactly where lapwings have a survival rate again of about 85%. So, a lapwing that makes it through to the third pregnancy. So there are two questions here. The first one of which is what caused that drop in survival rates? Well, we can identify that, and that was basically bad luck. So it was a series of cold winters. I don't know if anybody remembers the 81-82 winters. But there's a run of cold winters here, low survival, and that caused the population decline. The second question, and perhaps more interesting, is well, survival's bounced back up. Why the hell hasn't the population size bounced back up in parallel? And therein lies the story. So this is just a different way of plotting data. So along here you've got the added survival rates from 50% up to 100%, about 49% survival. And you can see that basically there's an increasing relationship with population growth. When survival rates are high, you get positive population growth. And you can see the blue dots, the blue dots and red dots colour to match the image graph. You can see the blue dots and red dots are about the same. So that relationship hasn't actually. If you increase the survival by a certain amount, you expect the population to increase by a certain amount. What has changed is nest survival. You can see in red here the period before the decline, nest survival was around 6 or 7 out of every 10 lapwing chicks. Now, that population. That's more like 4 or 5 are successful. And that's why the population hasn't decreased. The original decline is because of drop in survival, but the population can't recover because it can't change. And actually, that's what we find with a lot of changes. Not just one factor. Actually, multiple factors of this, which of course makes for additional complicated situation. And yeah, and there's a bunch of work that's been done on why that necessary rate and how much better. So anyway, that's an example of mapping. We're able to do this using ringing data for 17 species. You can see the picture on the screen there, a whole range of different species, from robins to sparrows. And we were able to sort of assess the causes of population change in each of these different species. And what was interesting, actually, is that for increasing survival rates seem to be relatively important to driving changes, but finding species productivity in ways more important. And in some respects, well, I guess it's both expected and important, because productivity is something that we can target. It's really hard, but so much to target survival response. Imagine how, start to try and think about how you improve the survival response. Start to think about how you might try and improve the productivity. It provides but of course, because productivity is variable, that's often why it causes. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So this is not. They are beautiful things. I'm going to talk about the curlew. So as you saw, if you remember from the big slide of yellow graphs I showed, curlew population is declining. And we want to understand what this is. And I apologize, this graph takes a little while to get your head right, so I'm going to take it step by step. If it gets too complicated, listen to others. Don't worry too much. So what we're interested in is population growth. Okay, and what we want is positive population growth. The population growth rate is all we want, and that's the blue colours. Okay. White here, the white line here is population growth. One, that means the population is exactly the same next year as this year. So no change. And then these green colours are population requirements. Okay. Now that population growth, they're going to be down to two things. Down to productivity, and it's going to be down to performance. Productivity here. We've got the slide here. I've just on the slide for simplicity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you for each combination of productivity and survival what the population. Okay, so that results in a slightly secondary. So up here, where you've got high survival, you've got high productivity, you've got blue colour going on. On the other side of the graph here, where you've got low productivity, the population is going down. And hopefully you can understand that this point in the middle, this white line, where the survival and the productivity balance each other out. So the number of chicks that are being produced balanced by the number of birds. And this black line here shows what the current survival rate is, 95%. So anyway, survival is quite high in curlew. And we can look to see, well, if our survival is 95%, what is the productivity that would balance that out? How many and you can see that's that black dot here. Unfortunately, our current estimate of curlew productivity records is quite a bit lower. The curlews are introducing enough chicks to balance the mortality that we're seeing. So there are two things. Another point I should notice is productivity that we require for stability is well within the range of productivity that has been reported. Curlews are quite capable of producing given the right conditions. Now we've got two courses of action. One of which is we can try and increase the survival. So we can move the dot left. So it meets the white line here. Or we can move the dot up. So we can either increase survival or we can increase productivity. So there are some things that we can do to increase survival. So quite a few curlew are still short of migration forms. And the year before last, thanks to a lot of hard work behind the scenes, there was some European directives aimed at basically so really curlew. So that's having some effect, but it's not a major driver of the population change. What we need to do is, and we can think of a bunch of ways of doing that. And we can think of the things that might be changed to affect productivity. So the most obvious one is nest sites. Is there enough good quality nesting habitat where curlews can hide their eggs and create chicks? Is there enough foraging? So you see these lurid green fields here are highly fertilized, and as a result of it, relatively low invertebrate densities. There's been lots of habitat loss, drainage of peatlands, for forestation. Just here. So there's potential for reversing habitat loss. Oops. And then curlew nest on ground. They're quite vulnerable to this. Waders as a group are quite vulnerable to this. Many birds aren't, but waders are the one group where I think that's one of the causes. Because we've basically restricted collaborative nesting in nature reserves, because that's where the good habitat is, they're basically can target. A bunch of different things there. And what we're doing at BTO is we've got a large program currently on curlew. So we've got a PhD student, Harry Ewing, who is going around doing surveys of nests, trying to understand how more birds nest in different habitats. We've got curlew nests. We've got a tagging program going on to understand that use, where are birds foraging, can we work out which foraging in. And finally, we're doing head starting. So this involves taking eggs from airfields where otherwise they would be pricked because the airplane people don't like birds nesting on the ground because they create a bird strike. Those nests would otherwise be destroyed. So what we're doing is working with partners as we are incubating eggs, raising chicks go. And those chicks have distinctive yellow colour flags on them, so that birds can report them. We have had several so that's just sort of a couple of very brief examples of how using ringing and other ETO data make real headway into understanding not only the causes of population change, but some of the things that we do about them. And I think if you were to go away with one message, it would be that ringing is important, and actually you can also play a part, even if you're not ringing. So even common birds like robins and blackbirds, they would identify we really need and want recoveries. So if you find dead birds with rings on, please do let us know about them. It might seem relatively uninteresting to you in the sense that the ring just down the road and the catwalk. But what's important is the balance of those over time, the proportion of those. So please, even if you have to find sort of a paper bag as an envelope and post it to us, you can do some beautiful drawings. Right? So drawing they made us. But actually, these days the easiest way to do it is through the web, of course. There's a web address here. It's on most of the rings now. You can report metal rings, and you can report color rings through us. Closed rings, sort of. But yes, if you do find ring birds, I know people are concerned about avian flu at the minute. They obviously use a little bit of consent, so if you're in the middle of sort of a big flock of dead swans, then probably best for the professionals. But if it's a robin or a blackcap or a blackbird or something, the chances are pretty minimal. If you're at all worried about health and hygiene, use a plastic bag or some plastic glove. Use a plastic bag as a glove, and then sort of read the ring, and then you can basically turn the bag inside out, and the bird can the bird can then go in that. So I think that's probably running out of time. For those of you going to sleep at the back, what did you miss? Well, I think a key point is the change is all around us, and one of the things and causing that change, so we can influence it in a good way. There's still much to learn about migration. I'm sure somebody it won't be me, but somebody giving this talk in 50 years' time will come up with some fabulous and fascinating facts about unexpected migration that birds are doing. Traditional ringing and new tagging methods are complementary. Both have a future, both tell things, both very much relevant today. As I just sort of explained a bit, ringing helps us understand survival, and that's actually really useful. So, organizing do funds work. And finally, I can't leave any talk without saying that ringers, particularly all beach, I cannot thank you enough for the effort. And I think with that, I will wrap up with a few things. Sticking to joining conservation, a government organisation who actually fund all of this co-ordination. So whatever you think about the politics of it, actually don't do indirectly. Give it. And thanks to you for.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. I found an absolutely fascinating look at the use and value of ringing. Thank you for that very interesting talk. We have a few minutes left. Have we got any questions for Rob from the audience, either here or on Zoom? Jane over there.
Hello. Okay, so the question for those people who are sort of listening online is, what proportion of ring birds do we get records back from? And the answer, slight cop-out, is it depends. So for birds like newt swan, big whites, many of which live in village ponds, actually we get information back on probably about 10 or 15% of birds that we rate. So what's that, 1 in 10, 1 in 8 birds as rated, that's what we're seeing there. Which is quite high. Obviously, for something like a goldcrest, which is really small, lives in sort of dense forest often, the rate is probably near 1 in 1,000. Very few back from that. one of the reasons that I make an effort to say, please do report on this, that actually over time you notice big drops in the numbers of ringbirds that get reported. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. One of which is the, certainly before we had the website, if you had to post, find an envelope, find a stamp, stick it on, rely on the postal system. But also I think there's just a big issue in the sense that people think, oh, a silver bird is probably coming from but it's not that. Really, it is that interesting. But also I think we've seen some increases. So just a little earlier about ringing ripples. And the control rate for ripples, so the number of ringed ripples that are caught by another ringer, used to be less than 1%, and now it's about 7 or 8%. And that's because ripples and systems are increasing garden feeders with Niger and some parts, so they're sort of available to be caught through. So we're seeing not only changes in population size, but behaviour that we need to tell us about. That's a slightly long-winded answer to your question. Any others?
I've got one that I've in the BOC we're spending quite a lot of time trying to persuade people to become surveyors because there's not enough people surveying. But what about ringing? Is there a good supply of ringers, or should we be encouraging people to be ringers as well?
Yes, that's a tricky one. Because ringing is obviously a bit more of a skilled activity and you're interacting directly with the birds. So first, what for training is really important. And we do have an issue with the capacity to have trainers. Down here, it's relatively not too bad. When you get up into northern Scotland, it becomes more. Obviously, we welcome as many people as we can, and we would encourage people to ring if that's what interests. I think also, perhaps more importantly, is we would encourage ringers who are already ringing to think about the ringing that they are doing and doing it in a way that sort of helps us more. So using things like the constant effort interaction. I didn't show you results from today, but actually that can also yield some really valuable information or less studies really focusing on. But also, if you want to get close to birds, think about natural sort of much easier to do.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, hello.
Do you know whether the drop in nest survival is
So the question was whether the drop in nest survival in curlews was mainly due to predation or due to lack of food. I'm sorry, but I think I'm going to use the same answer as the answers are often quite nuanced. I think it depends which area you are in, and it will vary between different regions. I think in particular areas nest predation problem, but I think the sort of across the larger landscape, it's food resource habitat loss. That's cool. And just simply because sort of the reach of agriculture and the reach of Western management is so much larger. Both with, they have quite high survival rates. You can cope with quite high levels of productivity. A curlew is going to live 15 years. It's probably a decent age for curlews. In that time, they breed when they're 2 years old, so in that time they can get 12, 13 nesting attempts. They lay 4 eggs in each pup. Each pair only really needs to replace itself. Each pair needs to raise 2 chicks to adulthood. So they've got, let's do the maths, 48 eggs, who they can lose quite a large proportion of those, still have a sort of a chance at a stable population. When you combine the sorts of the animals, when you sort of restrict their habitats, the population, then it becomes quite tricky.
Right, so this is another burning question out there. I think we better, looking at the clock, we better wrap up now. I'd like to say thank you again to Rob for the very interesting talk. I'm hoping we'll be able to invite you back in a few years' time to get the next chapter, if you like. I'm sure there'll be more interesting data. Thank you very much. Very much.